I'm Lauren Billy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Panda Jai. That soundtrack was amazing, Lauren.
Thank you very much.
You're
There'll be
welcome.
music later this evening. We're so glad all of you are here. Like I said, I'm Lauren. I'm one of the co-founders of Allbodies. We are so excited that Playboy, the iconic first ever sexual wellness brand, is partnering with us to host this course. Penda, what do you do?
Yes, I am a pleasure advocate, is what I like to call myself. I'm the founder and CEO of ProHo, which focuses on sexual liberties in Black communities and using pleasure as a means of social equity. So I'm so excited to be here with you and Allbodies and talk about sex and pleasure and all of my favorite things.
We are too.
Yes.
We're excited because Playboy just launched a new site called Pleasure for All. We'll plug it more, but Pleasure for all bodies, all wellness, all sexual wellness for everybody. And they brought in these CBD products that we'll be talking about and doing some giveaways. So part of the CBD point is to enhance intimacy and sensuality. So to go with that, they knew that we should really dive into the education part because so many of us never learned very much about our bodies or sex or how to communicate and tons of other stuff.
Exactly. Or when we did learn about sex, it was when we did learn about sex, it was all about anatomical or reproductive sex, but never about how sex can feel. And that's a very important part about sex, feeling good.
So, yeah, someone's asking me to turn up the volume. And Penda, you turn yours up, please, and we'll talk louder. Thanks for the tip.
Yes, thank you.
So, Penda, well, just so you know, everyone, Allbodies, we're a small startup, and we do education about the body. So we focus on our most important vulnerable topics like sexuality, healing trauma, body literacy, vaginal health, and we really just empower people to have information, support, and resources so that they can take agency over their body. And tonight, that's what we're gonna dive into because this is such a vulnerable topic. Wait, before we get into the vulnerable topic, don't you have some good questions for people?
Yeah, I do. I thought this would be a good time for us to kind of warm up the chat. Everyone just get, comfortable using their fingers and typing and being very community-based in this session because it's about you too. So we want to hear what you have to say. So just as a little warm up, if you're feeling good today in the chat right now, I want everyone to type Playboy. So just type Playboy in the chat. We want to know if you're feeling good, type Playboy. Woo! Nice.
Oh my God, there's 600 of you typing Playboy.
Amazing. That's a lot of people feeling good, and I love that. That's awesome. Look at this beautiful community. Look how many people are here. That's incredible. All right, I have another question. I think this is very on theme for tonight, but if you've ever faked an orgasm, type Playboy.
Uh-oh. We're gonna break the internet.
Oh, we're gonna break the internet. I saw caps. I saw exclamation points.
If you did it last night.
Right.
Sweet.
Yep. All right, so our chat is working. You know how to use it. But in that same vein, we do have a few rules when we use the chat. Do you want to tell them about the rules, Lauren?
Yeah. Even though we're never going to see all 680 of you on the face, we know that you're here. We can feel your energy. And since we are talking about this really vulnerable topic, we want to make sure that we create a safe and brave space for everyone. So we believe that each of you are co-creators in creating that space. And I just want to set the tone with a couple ground rules. Number one is be gentle with yourself and everyone here. Sex is a vulnerable topic, like we keep saying. It's intertwined with shame, trauma, indoctrination, faith, family, body stuff. It's intense, so be gentle. Another one is please have respect and come from a place of partnership for everyone here. Again, the only way that we can truly heal and transform this part of our lives and our culture is if we're supporting one another. What are the rules we have, Penda?
Yeah, I like to say, don't yuck my yum. So like if someone says something that's not your jam, it's not your vibe during sex, like cool, let it go. Like don't, interrupt the vibe. Don't yuck their yum. What they like is what they like, and what you like is what you like. And just overall respects. Like we're all in a freaking pandemic and quarantine. We're just doing the best we can. So this is a special moment for everyone to just talk and be chill and be open. So respect that.
I love that. Thank you. And
Yeah.
lastly, just consider access, because I would say even Allbodies, we framed this course really thinking that it was centered around straight cis couples, and it's not. The orgasm gap exists for lots of people and lots of groups of people. And we just want to acknowledge that people struggle with feeling good and being comfortable in their body. Pleasure gaps specifically exist with fat people, disabled people, people are recovering from trauma, people are recovering from codependency. Who else, Panda?
Yeah, people of color, BIPOC. I mean, and with everything that's going on in the world, and learning about the power of our body and the ownership that is placed on top of our bodies, how important it is today, and infinitely how important it is for us to understand the power of our pleasure, and how pleasure is a form of resistance, and how we have to tap into it. And it's yours to define and to dictate. So it's really, this conversation may seem irrelevant to some people, but it actually is really pertinent to what's going on in the world today.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So, I know we just gave you a bunch of different rules, but if you can do all that, if you're committed to creating a safe and brave space, could you raise your hand? There's actually a hand raise button at the bottom there.
Yes. And also to not get confused with the chat box and the Q&A, because there are some people in the Q&A. Let's use the chat box going forward for now.
Chat's for chatting. Q&A is for only questions. And as you know, if you got the email, hopefully you did, there was a question. Since there's so many of you, we bypassed the questions, and we have a bunch of them. So we're going to get to as many as we can. Who's teaching class tonight?
Ooh, Myisha Battle. The Myisha Battle.
We love Myisha. Myisha is a certified sex and dating coach, writer, and speaker. She has a company called Sex for Life, which hosts all of these things that she does. Plus, she runs 2 podcasts. One is called Down for Whatever, and one's called Dating White. She provides accurate sexual information, really takes careful, thoughtful, she's really careful with how she makes sure that things are inclusive, and that she allows you to create the pleasure dynamics that are right for you. She empowers, listens, and embraces that sex means lots of things to lots of people, and we all can define it for ourselves. Who else is she, Penda?
Myisha's voice is so buttery, like her words and everything. I think that's the adjective that I think of when I hear Myisha speak, is like butter. So I love that. And it makes you just want to be sensual and understand yourself more and what feels good. And I feel like she does such a great job of weaving in her own experiences with the experiences of others, and just feels very welcoming and understanding. So I've been listening to her podcast, and it's gotten me through some of the days, that have been alone and in solitude. So, and pleasure and connection.
Same. Are you all ready to meet her? Myisha, come on down.
That was the best intro I have received. So thank you both. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Penda. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited to be here and just share this space. I love that you both framed what we're doing here so well. And I'm excited to launch into some goodness with everybody here. Sweet. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we're going to get started with the content. Alrighty. So give me one moment. We're going to make this big for you. That's what she said, or he said. You have to start with the sex jokes, right?
Everyone's dying for your earrings, Myisha. We told you.
Thank you. They were a lovely gift from my partner. So I, full props, full props. Cool. Can everybody see my beautiful first screen?
Yes, everyone.
Awesome.
This is yes.
Thank you so much. All right, so welcome to the first class of a series of 3 amazing classes that are being brought to you by Allbodies and Playboy. I'm super honored to launch this. It just feels like a great privilege to start people on this journey. And I do think it's really applicable that class number 1 is called Explore, because that's where I personally believe we all need to start, exploring ourselves, understanding our own pleasure. So I'm going to talk you through a little bit about what we're going to cover today. We are going to address the orgasm gap, which is why you're here, right? I mean, some of you saw the content that Allbodies put out, and you know, some of that information was probably new or interesting. There's definitely there's something that brought you here in regards to this disconnect that we see in orgasmic experience. So we're going to delve into that and let you know what that's all about. I'm going to tell you why the clitoris is queen, and we're going to make sure that everyone here is able to take that information forward into their own lives and their experiences with their partners. We're then going to move into some anatomy. And I love how Penda was like, you know, we get the sex education, but it's largely anatomy that is focused on reproduction. And not only is that not everybody's plan all the time for their sexual experiences, but it leaves out a big portion of our experience as sexual human beings. So we're going to talk about anatomy from that perspective of where can we optimize pleasure. And then we're going to talk about specific ways to explore your pleasure. Some people really have a hard time getting started. Real hands-on, pun intended, pointers on what to do and how to do it. And then I'm going to leave you with a homework assignment because I am a sex coach. I believe that a lot of this work is done at home. It's done with you. It starts with beginning a practice, and that practice can involve so many. And then we're going to have a Q&A. I know that the Q&A was popping off at the beginning, so I'm really excited to answer your questions and just hopefully support where everybody is at right now. And that is in very different places, right? Before we get into the main content, I would love to guide you through a mindfulness. Some of you may be familiar with mindfulness, others not so much. It might be scary. You might think, ugh, I suck at meditation. Why are we doing this? But, you know, fantastic gateway to understanding your senses, your sensual self. Because when we talk about sensuality, we actually are talking about what information you're receiving from the outside world. And so many of us have the experience of living in the world from the neck up. And the neck up is great. You know, we get to think about things, we get to problem solve, we get to plan our days and our schedules and all of that. But we miss out on information that's being taken in by our bodies all of the time. So a mindfulness practice or a mindfulness meditation, daily, weekly, wherever you need it, can actually help you support your quest for pleasure. So that's why we're going to start there. So I want you all to find a comfortable seated position wherever you're at, wherever feels safe. And this is going to be just a 3-minute meditation that's going to guide you through your 5 senses. So I want you to start actually with your eyes open. We're going to explore what you can see right now. You can start by focusing in on the screen in front of you, and then just expanding that. Maybe looking up ever so slightly, just above the screen, taking in what's around you in the room. You may want to pan your head left and then circle back slowly to the right, noticing any details that catch your eye. And then maybe just kind of glance the eyes up. Maybe you've never really looked up at that ceiling before in this way, from this angle. And just allow the eyes to drift down to the floor. And focus in. Are there any details that you can really pull out? Things you've never noticed before? I'm noticing some things. And then I want you to, if you feel safe to do so, I invite you to go ahead and close your eyes. So closing the eyes can actually help to heighten some of the other senses. So with a deep inhale, I want you to smell what's around you. It's really taking in the smells of the room. And I want you to tune in to what you hear. Maybe you can hear what's going on outside of my voice. Maybe you have noise canceling AirPods in. Just kind of taking a moment to hear that silence. And then I want you to move to the mouth and see what you can taste. Is there something lingering there? Did you have a cup of coffee this evening? And just go ahead and take a deep swallow. And as you do so, I want you to tune into the sensation that you have, the contact with your chair or the bed, just all the points that are feeling connection to the outside world, and also taking a scan of the body and seeing how your skin is taking in that information. Do you feel a breeze? Is it cool? Is it warm? Just letting yourself feel into this moment and get really grounded in the space that you're in and in your body. All right, we're going to take a few collective deep breaths, inhaling through the nose and out through the mouth. Again, in through the nose and out through the mouth. One more time. In through the nose and out through the mouth. So with a gentle smile on your face, just sort of blink your eyes open, come back into the room. If you want to, you can take some notes about what you just experienced. Feel free to jot down a few things that came up for you, things that you felt or saw or heard or tasted that you were surprised by. And with that, we will continue on. The orgasm gap is this phenomenon that researchers stumbled upon. And it's kind of taken the sexology world by storm. Since the original studies happened a few years ago, this work has been expanded upon. So when Lauren mentioned that the orgasm gap is not strictly a heterosexual experience, that is absolutely true. In any partnership, there could be a disparate experience between partners. And so what we're really doing is looking at the original research where lots of studies were done, and within different populations, we saw that the majority of women, depending on the research, up to 70% of these participants in the study, they didn't usually reach orgasm during mixed sex sexual activity. whereas their male counterparts reported, 90% of the time that they do experience orgasm. And we see in mixed sex partnerships that there is this prioritization of vaginal and penile penetration. We call it PIV, penis and vagina sex. And there's also this priority of men's satisfaction, and we don't really need to look very far to understand why that is. A lot of sex research actually uses the male body as the main prototype, the main focus. And, that has carried through even to our common literature around sexual pleasure, ads or blogs about, 50 ways to please your man have been focused towards women. So you can kind of see where that internalization of, it's not for me, this experience of pleasure, but it's for my partner. So a lot of the reasoning behind the orgasm gap is cultural. And some of it is about education around the body. So we're gonna actually get into some detail about that. But I wanna just tell you that vaginal penile intercourse, according to a large swath of studies, has been shown to not reliably result in orgasm for women. And what we mean by that is vaginal penetration exclusively is not known. One of the reasons for that is that there's not a lot of actual sensation within the vaginal cavity for female-bodied folks to experience arousal and pleasure. And when you actually look at the structures that we have for pleasure, you'll see where we have the most potential. But what are we even talking about when we talk about orgasm? I mean, that experience can be so varied for so many different people, right? Well, in sexology, we say that an orgasm is the peak of the human sexual response cycle. And in this slide, you'll see that, there's arousal, which is the stimulus. And there's this period of time where we kind of have this nice natural buildup of excitement. And that can kind of plateau in the plateau phase and feel really good. That's sort of when you got your rhythm going. It's really fun, but it's not explosive yet. And a caveat on explosive, but usually an orgasmic experience, it happens after this plateau phase where there's a buildup of tension. So this is kind of like a building up of tension period. And then, oh my God, here we go. And then there's a resolution phase. The resolution phase here is depicted as going straight down, basically back to square one, right? But in actuality, this can be any number of degrees. Like for multiple orgasms, this could be a multi-hump situation, right? And it also depends on your body. We see that male-bodied folks will have this more dramatic resolution phase than female-bodied folks. And that's really important to note too, is that there are specific differences that exist between sexes in terms of response. But there really isn't a difference up until this point, right? So if we're looking at why there's a problem or this 20% discrepancy in experience of orgasm, we really have to see like, okay, well, what's going on here? What's going on in the excitement phase? What's going on in the plateau phase? What could be missing? So one of the things that I think is important to point out is that orgasm results in deeply pleasurable sensations throughout the body, including spasms, not always for everybody, but it does happen. And a release of feel-good hormones like oxytocin and vasopressin. These two hormones are actually really awesome for stress reduction. So when we're talking about an orgasm gap and, male-bodied folks having on average maybe 20% more experience of that, they're also getting more experience of these feel-good hormones, right? And to me, that makes this discrepancy even more egregious because it's like, yeah, it's unfair that this is happening, but also women have not been able to get sort of the full sexual experience and benefits of having a healthy sexual connection. So we want to talk about that. That's why we're here. We want to learn more about why this is happening and how we can start to break it down and bridge that gap. Why the clitoris is clean. Only about 30% of women actually do have orgasms from intercourse alone. And the clitoris is where the action is. Most women who orgasm during sex have figured out how to hit their sweet spot, either from positioning or from direct stimulation of the clitoris with fingers. And I would extend this to say, with toys, with someone's mouth, with any number of things. I mean, a lot of female-bodied folks actually do experience their first foray into pleasure by grinding on a pillow, grinding on a blanket, grinding on a towel, grinding on a banister. I've heard couches, all of these things. We are pleasure-seeking animals, basically. So we do what feels good. And it's kind of unfortunate that we gain that information tactily, viscerally as kids, but then through our education, this idea of pleasure is sort of stripped away from the experience. And we really just get something that's focused on reproduction, or, this is how sex happens. And it's a very heteronormative experience that isolates a lot of people, but it is also a very, it's devoid of pleasure for most people. So I want to talk to you about this queen because I have a model. And can you guys see my screen? Can you see me as I'm talking? Because I can't see myself.
Yes, we can.
Great. So you can see her. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. This is Sheila. Sheila came to me at the World Association of Sexology in Mexico City last year, and I was so stoked to see that there was somebody who had these 3D models, these 3D renderings of the clitoris, because I'd read about them. I was super excited about them. The plans for this are available for free online. So if you're so inclined and you have access to a 3D printer, some libraries actually have them. You can print your own and you can name her or him or they, them, whatever you want. Mine is Sheila and her pronouns are she, her. So when I talk about the queen, I'll probably be referring to Sheila from here on out. Okay. This probably isn't what you expected because, yeah.
I just want to interrupt. People really want to see it. Will you hold it up? Yes.
Sheila, our queen, Sheila.
Bow down, bow down, bow down. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to hold it like this if this is good for everybody. Because this is typically all that we see, even more obscured than that. This is really what we see, if we're lucky, right? For
sharing for a second so everyone can see. Or
yeah.
They're still having trouble.
Okay.
There you go.
So here we go. So Sheila has this gland here, usually obscured by a clitoral hood. And we're going to see this in the next slide. But she also has these amazing arms, fingers, as they've been referred to. This is actually to scale. Okay, so this is what we would typically see in the structure of someone who has female genitalia. And typically what we would only see exposed is this. And let me tell you, she's powerful because this portion of her has about 8,000 nerve endings. To put that into perspective, that's actually equivalent, give or take, to how many nerve endings are on the entirety of the front of a penis, basically. So that's why it's not just about the clitoris, find the clitoris, stimulate her clitoris, stimulate your clitoris. It's about figuring out how to stimulate her. And going directly for this, which is what a lot of people's instinct is actually pretty sensitive and can hurt, especially if you're not entirely aroused yet. So it's really cool to see that these sort of extensions go down into you where those are as well. But I mean, find a textbook a commonly used textbook that even has a clitoris. I was at a women's health clinic, and their depiction of a vulva did not include a clitoris, not even like a little dot at the top, nothing. So this is really, I think language is important. And when we're not using the right language, or we don't understand how things function, then we're really missing out on major aspects of our sexual experience. So a lot can be achieved by stimulating these areas of the clitoris that are, for lack of a better term, sort of buried. They're obscured. We don't see them, but they're very crucial to our pleasure. All right, so I'm gonna do a little screen share again. And let's see. How's that?
You're blowing people's minds, Myisha.
That's what I wanted to do. That's what I mean, you know, clitoris drop. That's, you know, this is really important stuff. This is why I do what I do. And I hope that all of you take this information, like you can Google this and show people, you know, send this article. It was a French company that started making this 3D model. And so forward this to everybody that you know. Everybody, like literally, your Christmas list, Hanukkah list, holidays, Kwanzaa, like share it with the world. Okay, so that's a little bit about why she's queen. It's that she really has all of these dimensions that we can't see, and she kind of rules our pleasure in a major way. All right, so when we talk about basic vulva anatomy, it's not so basic. You know, we got a lot going on. I used to say it's complicated, but I don't think it's complicated. It's just, there's a lot to work with. Like there's so much to explore that's beyond the vagina, which is what we're taught, right? So as you see in this, this depiction, you have the clitoral hood, which actually is a flap of skin, much like the foreskin that would cover the clitoris. Like I said, it would be, in some cases, completely covered. The clitoris here, which is the little nodule that you would be able to see. And then the labia majora is the outer sides of the vulva. That's where these guys are, typically. And then inside the labia minora, that's where these fingers would be. And so these become engorged with blood when you're aroused, or when a female-bodied person is aroused. And that's where we see like the puffiness, the redness, the swelling and everything. And it becomes super, super supple, tender, you know, really fun to touch, right? Feels really good. That's the area that you want to keep your focus on. I also love that, like, moving down here, we have the vulva vestibule, which is, it kind of houses a couple things. It houses our urethral opening, but also our vaginal opening. So one point I wanted to make is that the way we're taught about our vaginas, or in any hole, right? And I've had clients that are a little bit terrified of their vaginal opening. It just feels scary and a little startling to male-bodied folks who have spent their entire life engaging with their genitals on the exterior of their body. But for us, a lot of things are internal. I love the term vulva vestibule because it gives this word to the skin and the tissue that is kind of surrounding the vaginal opening. And a vestibule, as some of you may know, is like the entryway, you know? So I think about it as like a pleasant place to invite guests every now and then. Sometimes you might hang out there yourself. But it's you know, it's a welcoming place. And it's not just a hole. There's a lot going on. So just wanted to point that out. And of course, the distinction here too is that your vaginal opening here is not all that you are. In fact, the vulva is what encompasses all of our genitalia. So I also encourage people to use the term vulva when you would typically say vagina, because it's limiting. When you say, you know, vagina, you're really just referring to this part of your anatomy, when of course, remember, Sheila has some things to say about that. She does not like to be left out. So this is just a way for you to understand as you start to explore, you know, what can you explore and how? Well, I, as a coach, I know some people think sex coach, you must be in the room with people, talking to them about how to do what to whatever with whomever, but it's not true. I actually give people homework assignments all the time to explore their own pleasure in a number of ways. But I think for those of you who are curious about getting more information about yourself, whether that's just because you want to experience orgasm solo or because you want to be able to have more information to communicate to a partner, there are a lot of things that you can try. So knowing your anatomy is number one, right? Knowing what is there is first and foremost. Then we can apply some different variations. So the first thing that I recommend is playing around with pressure. And I think that some people might think that's strange, but for vulva havers, remember I was talking about grinding on blankets, grinding on, you know, pillows or stuffed animals even, or banisters. That requires pressure. And some people find that to be extremely pleasurable. But when we think about masturbating, we don't really factor that into the equation as much as I think we should. So pressure is really key. Noticing whether or not you respond to a light touch versus a little bit more of a firmer grip is important to know. And my main point here too is you want to be exploring in a way that of course is like inviting more and more pleasure for yourself, obviously, but you also want to be taking notes mentally, or, you know, we're going to actually give you an assignment where you can write some of this stuff down. But this is crucial information for you to own your pleasure and to understand what makes you work, because I know the tendency is to hear a story about something that worked for somebody else and try that, and if it doesn't work, to give up. And I like to think of masturbation as a practice. Some of you may have a meditation practice, some of you may have like a workout regimen practice, you know. Masturbation can be a practice, and it should be. It can be frustrating when it doesn't necessarily lead to orgasm all the time. But if you approach it that way of, hey, I'm learning, I'm trying new things, I'm taking notes, I'm gathering the data, I think this is a good way to stay open and to receive even more pleasure in the future, because you're going to be working from a model that you're building on and building and building and building. All right, so the next thing I recommend is to explore different strokes. Some people like a kind of circular stroke. Some people get as, you know, detailed as counterclockwise versus clockwise. You know, think about that. When you vary that, is that helpful? Or is it not what you need at all? You know, some of this may be awful. And then, you know, windshield wiper, wiping back and forth, wiping front to back, just sort of feeling where on your vulva is most sensitive and what feels good. This is all about feeling good. And then finally, trying different points of contact. And what I mean by that is you can start with one finger, or maybe even just like the tip of a finger. Start there, expand, add another finger, add, you know, more contact with more of your finger. You can, you know, put a whole palm into it. Some people really enjoy that. You know, that might be too much for you. But the whole point is we're gathering data. We're figuring out what works, what doesn't work. Right. Cool.
I just want to jump in to say that a lot of people in the chat are talking about how even just exploring this is really hard just because of the mental blocks.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to talk about
That's
that
true.
at all? Yeah, or is there?
Well, this particular piece of it is talking about the anatomy. The mental blocks come up when we feel guilt, we feel shame, we feel anxiety about leaning into our own pleasure. So what needs to happen is creating a context that works for you. And that's going to be different for everybody as well. I know some people who their context for masturbation or even pleasure release is when they feel super stressed out. Remember, I had, you have those amazing feel is I'm stressed out, I'm going to masturbate. Pleasure is the antidote to that, right? Whereas some other people are like, no way, no how. I need complete calm. I need quiet. I need to feel like I have really good privacy, where I feel safe, where I feel a lot of comfort. And just getting really specific about what those things are is important, because as difficult as it is for me to say, literally and figuratively, it's not enough to say I have a mental block. I think there's important information about why the block is there and steps that we can all take to overcome these blocks. Really sift the why. And the why can be painful. The why can require, that you do seek out help for anxiety, depression, help for healing from trauma, right? These things, as Lauren mentioned before, are all present in our sexualities. And there's no one way to get at getting over a mental block. It's going to be different for every person. And if that block is something that you can access and understand, then you can start to build your toolkit for figuring out, oh, okay, hey, I'm going to that place. Here are the things that I've learned to help me get through that place to the other side where I can experience pleasure. Because your mind is the biggest sex organ, and it will cock block you. It's like, it's true. I've been there. And, it's something that has to be unpacked over time, and with a lot of love and support for yourself and from, people who can help you. So yeah, this stuff is not easy. We're really talking today about ways that you can just start. And if you start and the thought gremlins start up, take note of that, and take note of how they showed up and what they were telling you about yourself, because that's also really useful information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
everyone's in love with you saying that the mind is the biggest sex organ, and it's so true. So true.
It is. It really is. All right. So y'all ready for some homework? Yeah? Okay. I know it might be scary.
Practice this stuff.
What's that?
In the homework, we can have people start to log how they feel, like the things that are in with what's standing in our way.
Mm-hmm. Yes. The biggest takeaway from my homework assignment that I'm giving you is to figure out what feels pleasurable. But if you cannot get to that place yet, then your homework assignment is figure out what your blocks are, your mental blocks. But also I want you to challenge yourself to try to get one piece of pleasure out of it, right? Anything that's worth doing, I think, has some aspect of pleasure in it. It's even healing, which is hard for all of us. So the first step is explore your vulva through masturbation, right? Using some of the techniques. I also recommend, using the sensual meditation, the mindfulness meditation that we did at the beginning of class. Use that to drop into your feelings, all of the sensations that can come up for you, and use them to exploring your body. Now that you have this information about what is where, then give yourself the opportunity to invoke touch and figure out how touch feels in certain parts of your body. And you want to notice what feels best and take lots of notes. What feels good for me? What I mean by writing down 3 points of pleasure and being specific is like, I enjoyed my clitoral hood being stimulated with 2 fingers with a wiping motion from left to right for 2 minutes. Get that specific. You don't have to get that specific on trial 1, but try to narrow it down and get as specific as you can from session to session. Okay, so you're gonna wanna take notes every time you do this assignment. And I recommend that you try it, twice a week. so that you're really gathering data on a regular basis. One thing to note too, that I think amazing about having a masturbation practice is that it's not going to feel the same every time. You know, if you're making a practice of it, if it's really a habit, if it's something that you do for you, you know, it's going to feel different on a Monday evening when you've had a stressful work meeting right before, but you really want to masturbate, versus, you know, you're having thoughts about a really exciting encounter that you had and really getting lost in that fantasy, right? So that's also useful information. Okay, this time was kind of weird because of this time was great because of whatever it is. Write it down, and like I said, be as specific as you can, because we're going to talk in the next couple of classes about how you're going to communicate that. And I know this all sounds like crazy, that you would gather all this data and then have to tell somebody else about it, but that's how we get to great sex. And that's what I want for every single person on this call tonight. So thank you so much. We are actually going to take a break, but I just want to hype that class 2 and class 3 are also going to be lit. And we're just really excited to continue to support all of you in your journey of learning about yourself, learning how to communicate about sex, because I tell you what, nobody's taught this stuff. Nobody. So you're learning, and you'll be inspirations to other people in your lives because you'll be able to talk about it, right? And then we're going to put all this stuff into practice. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for having me, Playboy and Allbodies.